Hey everybody, it's Maureen Walbioff here with some Friday Facebook Live, as usual, 12:30 Eastern Time, most Fridays. Practical wisdom for nonprofit accidental techies. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about reference checks for software vendors, right? You may have seen demos, you might be ready to sign that contract. You should talk to someone, who's not the software vendor, but how do you find them? What do you ask them? Who asks them? We're going to unpack a little bit of that this afternoon. I hope you're all having a great Friday. It is leading up to 4th of July time, which means that everyone from Boston is headed down to Cape Cod. Lots more cars on the road. Lots more people in the supermarket who don't know where things are. So it's really fun to live somewhere where everybody kind of comes on vacation, because most people are in a really good mood because they're not working. So before we dive into the references, though, I just want to give you a little pitch again for Friday, July 19th with my friends at Every Action. We're going to be explaining everything you don't understand, including me, about payment processors and merchant accounts and gateways and Stripe and PayPal and IATs and all of those names who like to take a % or two of a donation before that money gets put into our bank account. So 12:30 Eastern Time right here with Every Action on July 19th. Just mark that in your calendar. I'll be sending some promotions out about it because I think it's going to be a very important 30 minutes. I'm really looking forward to connecting some dots and blowing some mist away when it comes to understanding how all this stuff works. So how do you get references for software vendors, potential software partners that you might be contemplating? You have followed some type of search process, evaluation process. Maybe you've seen a proposal, so you know how much this new system is going to cost you. And just like bringing a new person onto your team inside your organization, reference checks are necessary to do. Now, I have done tons of reference checks on prospective hires in my career, and it used to be fair game. You could ask anything of a reference, and now we can't do that as much anymore. If we're an employer, there's certain things we are allowed to ask a reference, an employment reference, and certain things we're not allowed to ask. We're really interacting with a former employer or a close colleague of our prospective hire, and we're kind of verifying what they said was in their resume. Did they work at this title? Can't even ask salary information anymore. What were the dates of hire, and are they eligible to be hired again? So that gets to some of the, do I want this person on my team kind of thinking when you're checking references about people. But if you're checking references about a software vendor, the sky's the limit. You can kind of ask anything. We are not bound by HR or employment laws. However, you don't want to turn it into a free-for-all and ask a bunch of stuff that's not really, really relevant. When you're thinking about reference checks for your prospective software vendor, a couple of things just to start us off. The first is try to remember that the people that you're talking to may have had different requirements, or their organization may be set up very differently than your org is. So here's a good example. If you're talking with a reference for platform potato, and you hear some not so great things from that reference about the peer-to-peer functionality. Now, you don't have peer-to-peer functionality, so I would take it with a grain of salt. I would pay attention to any themes that you're hearing, like if in that peer-to-peer example, the reference is saying, we didn't get good documentation about peer-to-peer, we didn't get training about peer-to-peer, the system didn't do what the sales folks told us it could do. That's on a roadmap somewhere, and that functionality isn't live yet for us to use. Those kinds of things I would pay attention to, but not necessarily that, you know, peer-to-peer didn't work for us in their system unless peer-to-peer is important to your set of requirements in selecting a new software vendor. So that's the first kind of preliminary. The second preliminary is there are some systems that are very commonly used that are kind of one function systems. Typically things that are event management, sometimes board oversight. There's a lot of software that powers board engagement and communication and collaboration, or email marketing tools like Constant Contact or MailChimp. Those are kind of single functionality systems, and often you're not really dealing with a salesperson. You're going to the MailChimp website and you're saying, okay, this is how many contacts I have, this is the level of access to software functionality that I'm looking for. So this is going to run me, you know, $110 a month to use MailChimp, for example. You're not really gonna talk to a salesperson, get a proposal, and follow what is more of a formal sales process for platforms. This advice that I'm giving you today, you certainly could use if you're considering, I'm on Constant Contact now, I might want to use MailChimp, I've been using brown paper tickets, I might want to move to Eventbrite. At that point, you can kind of put a call out into your network. Colleagues, peers, maybe your brother-in-law uses MailChimp for his business. Much more informal, much less risk often, because the move into a MailChimp is usually not anywhere near as heavy as moving into a new CRM or an online fundraising system. So still you can ask around and see what people think about using a single source or a single function product like that. But we're really talking about a major change to your organization. Donor database, online fundraising system, apps for Salesforce, right? Vetting Classy or Click and Pledge. Definitely would want to talk to references about app providers that you might be contemplating, or certainly a whole unified CRM product. For those bigger moves, you know, you've kind of gotten to a point in your search process where you are down to 2 finalists, usually. Or maybe you know who you're going to go with, and it's the last phase of the vetting process. Reference checks. It's time to ask the vendor to give you client references, whether it's 1 or 2 products. Don't do it too early. And I've ranted a little bit, loving rants about selection processes gone horribly wrong because folks started just with asking their peers, hey, who likes platform potato? Without really doing the internal reflection and discovery needed to know whether a product might be a good fit for you before you even do a demo or contact that company. So that's a little caveat emperor there. Buyer beware. If you're asking for references too early in the process, not overly helpful. So you're at the right point in the process. You're going to go to a software vendor, the folks you've been working with on the sales and demo process, and you're going to ask them for 3 or 4 client references. And you probably will get 3. Sometimes software vendors, you know, don't want to bug the same clients over and over again. So it may take them a little bit of time to find an organization that's happy on their system, because these are hand-picked references, so they better be happy on the system and are available and willing to talk to prospective buyers like you. So you're going to get some references. They are hand-picked. You may want to add some criteria to your request of the vendor to say, I want an organization that is in our vertical, has a mission that's very similar to ours, or has an organization size, staff-wise, and operating budget-wise that's similar to ours, or does international work programmatically similar to ours. You may not get kind of your mystery match date there, that's somebody who's literally so close to your organization that everything that they say may be super relevant. So you gotta be flexible and fluid with who you get from a software vendor. And you know, you're gonna wanna get 4, as I said, 3 or 4, and you must talk to at least 2. Gotta talk to at least 2. And sometimes, you know, it's hard to connect with these software vendor, with these client references. I've got a client now who is in the reference check part of our fun show, working on a selection project together, and they've managed to get a hold of 2, having a real hard time getting hold of the final one. It's actually the most critical reference. But my my project lead over inside the organization is saying, you know, 1 more email and I'm going to cross over into stalker range. So, you know, be persistent, pleasantly persistent, but know when to give up, maybe. Or maybe even look for someone else inside the organization who's not so busy and maybe has relevant information for you. You want to try for a phone or video meeting if you're a video meeting person, if at all possible. Default to email last. Always try to do phone. Much easier to get a rapport going and kind of tease out some nuances. If somebody says, you know, that's a really hard question for me to answer, hearing them say that as opposed to them thinking it if they're responding to your questions by email will tell you different information. Just like employee references, handpicked, got some certain questions that you should ask, and we'll talk about the big 6 in a second. The point of these references is to find out what the experience of that other organization has been working with the system and working with the company. Will they be a good fit for you? References are just that. They're kind of like a finger in the wind, another piece of data. Unless you're hearing a lot of really horrible stories, which I would be surprised that you might hear. Sanja is here, so good to see you here, my darling. Thank you for joining. We're talking about client getting references for software vendors, and if you're not a techie, what do you even ask another client? So I was just saying that you're looking for fit, you know, you're looking for, is this person's story making me feel like it's a good idea for me to work with this company or not? Lots of red flags. Maybe I want to slow down that sales process a little bit, check a couple more references and see if this is an outlier. Especially if you're only talking to 2 people. You might get 1 glowing reference and 1, ooh, it was bumpy and I don't know if I would do it again. I don't know if I would pick this vendor again. Then you're like in a 50-50 tie. So statistically, it's going to be hard to land. You might need a 3rd kind of tiebreaker to see if it's another positive experience or perhaps not. Who should be on these calls and how long should they take? Nobody got time, so 20 minutes. And I do this when I'm booking meetings with potential clients or folks that I'm doing free consult with. 20 minutes, you know, it's not an hour. It's tidy. They can book 30 minutes. And even if you go a little bit over, it's still in that 30-minute window. Feels like I can do that in a week. As I said, phone or video meeting. 1 person at your organization should be contacting 1 reference. You shouldn't have your whole selection committee sort of ready to pounce with 1,000 questions for this 1 poor organizational reference, you know, who uses Platform Potato. You want 1 person. It should be a one-on-one meeting, one-on-one conversation. Perhaps you want to divvy up those reference calls, though, and you might want to have, if an executive director or a CEO is one of the contact people that the software vendors give you, you might want someone at the C level to actually conduct that conversation with these questions. Maybe not. Or maybe if you're talking to somebody in fundraising or development as opposed to a database administrator, then you might want to invite somebody else, maybe, on that reference call. But otherwise, the real rule of thumb is 20 minutes or less, and one-to-one conversations, and a conversation is way preferable to an email message. So let's talk about which questions you should ask, right? Again, similar to hiring a new employee and yet oh so different at the same time. First question here to ask is, what made the product a good fit for your organization? Just open-ended questions, right? If you haven't sort of practiced those are questions that cannot be answered easily with a yes or a no. Open-ended means someone has to actually give you a response that's not just an affirmative or negative. So a closed-ended version of that question was, is this product a good fit for your organization? They can say yes or no. So you can see how you elicit different responses with those open-ended questions. It's an old counselor trick. What made this product a good fit for your organization? That's question number one. Question number two, what was the migration process like? And then just be quiet. Let them answer that question. Maybe they're going to say, I wasn't there during the implementation. I've only been here for a year. I can't really speak to that. Totally cool. Move on. Third question, how is your account managed? Who handles your account at this software vendor? Do you have a named person who you can reach out to outside of general support requests? Or does that person just exist in name only, and it's kind of, they show up when it's time to renew your contract? Is there someone that you have a monthly strategic meeting with, or who will run a report on your performance and serve it up to you once a quarter and wants to talk to you about trends? So how is your account managed? Do you know that? That's question number three. Question number four is, tell me about your experience being trained on the product. And again, this might be somebody who's not a frontline user that you're speaking with. Excuse me, it's still allergy season on the Cape. Much better. Okay, how did you get trained? Was it virtual? Did somebody show up and train you on site? Did you watch pre-recorded videos and that was about it? Lots of different ways training can be delivered. Make sure you know whether they found that to be satisfactory or not. And side note, make sure that you know how the training will be delivered in the proposal or contract. You've got to look back and make sure that you understand how your training is actually going to be managed, because it's so critical to user adoption, satisfaction with using the platform, and return on investment. Another open-ended question that's important to ask is, how's the support? What's it like getting support? Do you trust the information that the support person is giving you? Do you get different answers depending on who you ask the same question of? And that I hear from time to time about different support models. So do you log a ticket? What's the turnaround time? Is there a lot of back and forth? You know, is there 3 weeks of back and forth before you finally get to resolution? Can you get on the phone with somebody, or is it all in chat and email, which takes longer often to kind of pull your situation out of you in dribs and drabs? It's much faster to actually patch a call if you can. So that's question number 4. Question number 5 for these vendor references is, what would you have done differently, or share some lessons learned? So, you know, nothing's perfect. There's always going to be little bumps. Always little surprises are going to happen. Do not expect super smooth all the way through. And if that's been your experience, yay. I would love to hear a comment from you, or see a comment if you've moved and it was actually like better than you even expected. I would love to be able to tell that story on a Facebook Live in the future. There's usually some unexpected somethings that are going to bubble up. How did it go moving in? You know, did someone make a horrible discovery a third of the way through the implementation project that derailed you, that cost you money, that forced your launch to go out 6 weeks from the date that you had been promised at the beginning of the project. So what were their lessons learned? You know, if I had it to do all over again, I would have hired them to clean our data. But instead, I decided that we could handle that internally. I wanted to save some money, and that turned out to be a mistake. That scenario, there's nothing on the software vendor. It's ownership at the organization level. Whoever was managing the project and making those decisions would have made a different decision about an internal business process that impacted the migration, right? So the nuances there are really important. And then finally, a great question, if you're ever in some kind of interaction where you're pulling information out of someone, no matter whether it's a reference or a staff person or a colleague, what haven't I asked that's important for me to know, right? These are our blind spots. I don't know what I don't know. Raise his hand. We all have those. Some have many of them when it comes to software purchasing. So give them the opportunity of, in the conversation was like an open text box. What else should we know? And ask them that, because something important may come up when you give them the opportunity to just share anything else that's on your mind as you think about working with this platform and this company. You know, give them the open donation field version of your donation form. So those are the 6 questions. What made the product a good fit for your organization? What was the migration experience like? How is your account managed? Tell me about your experience being trained. What would you have done differently, or what lessons learned do you have to share with me? And is there anything else that I should be asking that you'd like to tell me about? So you can do that in 20 minutes, right? Totally can bang that out in 20 minutes. You're going to document the answers. You're going to share those answers with your selection team or the part of the selection team that's actually making the final decision. If you have to default to email, fine. You know, if that's really the only way that you're going to get any answers to these questions from a reference, then zip them over an email. I'll actually list them below this video once we're wrapped this afternoon, so you can copy and paste them and send them off an email if you like, or print them out and be ready to ask them when you're at that point in your purchasing process. If you can't find references, or sometimes if you want more, you know, like, you gave me a couple, I actually want to talk with 4. You gave me 3, I could only get a hold of 2. Or the ones that you gave me are not like me enough that I really want to hear from somebody else. Or if you get good reference, not so good reference, and you need that tiebreaker. There's a couple of places that you can go. The first is to go to the software platform's website, because somewhere they have logos of organizations just like yours that may or may not be the references that they gave you. But if you go to our client list page on a software vendor's website and you see, oh, there's a couple of organizations that use this product, I know somebody at that organization, or that organization is just like us. I really would like to hear what their experience has been using the system and working with this business. So click over to the website for that organization. Try to find somebody in a fundraising or data or IT or marketing and communications, whatever the functionality is that the software you're considering can serve up, and look that person up. You can also go to LinkedIn once you know, like, I need to talk with Mary Smith. She's the person who I think is might be a good reference, or at least a starting point for me. Hop on over to LinkedIn, find Mary, connect with her, and send her a message. I'm contemplating using X software. You're listed on their website as a client. Are you willing to talk with me for 15 or 20 minutes about your experience? Game changer, right? You get to find your own references too. That's the beauty of getting references. You're not necessarily only able to use the ones that they give you. The second thing that you can do is put that general call out to your networks, to social media. Hey, I'm contemplating Platform Potato. I want to hear from a couple people who are willing to have a conversation with me, not just willing to say, like it, hate it, you know, whatever their comments are in their reply to your social media post. You want to actually unpack a little bit more. So pick a couple people, try to get in touch with them and add them to your reference checklist. So that's the second place you can look. Another place you can look is Capterra and softwareadvice.com. Capterra is CAPTERRA.com and softwareadvice.com. They both have very robust sections for nonprofit software of all different types and at all different price points. So you can probably find your platform potato and look at a couple of things. What are the ratings and reviews? Sometimes they're anonymous. Sometimes people provide their names. Hop over to that organization and try to talk to Bob. And because if he gave a reference or a review with stars and a little bit of commentary on Capterra or software advice, they're probably willing to speak with you. So that's a third place you can look. And finally, and this comes from the Treat Yourself to a New CRM webinar that Christina from Anera and I did a couple of weeks ago. She asked at conferences. Her timing of her process, her search process, was such that she kind of had some finalists in mind when she went to the Nonprofit Technology Conference out in Portland earlier this year. Bridge is coming up. You know, even though it's summertime, there's a ton of conferences. You might be going to Netroots or one of a billion conferences that I can't think of right now that are happening now, and then starting in September, the fall and autumn push of conferences starts up. So you can, you know, if you're sitting next to somebody at lunch or at a session, say, you know, I'm thinking about using product X. Any chance that you use that? Or do you know anybody who uses it? So you don't have to limit yourself to just the references that the software vendors give you. You can self-serve those references. I gave you those 6 questions. You're going to take things with, you know, importance, but also a grain of salt, because they and their organizational needs are not the same as you and your organizational needs. So that can color an experience. What if you hear something horrible? What do you do if you are enamored? Like, I want Platform Potato. They have been fantastic for us. The functionality is all exactly what we wanted. The budget is great. Our team is excited. I talked to 3 references and they were all not good. What do you do? Do you ignore it and just go, maybe those were aberrations? I'm going to pretend that I didn't make those calls. You can't unknow what you know. And really the logical next step there, if that is your unfortunate circumstance, is go back to the software vendors. Hey, salesperson from Platform Potato, I talked to 3 people and they all told me some things that made me feel nervous. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what I heard, because it's kind of coloring my decision. Candor, transparency, building and establishing a trusting business relationship. That's your goal at every point in this search process. Is, do we have the same values? Is the software vendor, is Platform Potato person going to say, oh, you know, they're really unhappy, but they didn't get their act together, or they had a lot of turnover? Are they going to put the onus all on the organization, whether it belongs there or not? Or are they going to say, you know, I totally understand why they said that. I'd like to get the project manager for that implementation project on a call with you, and we can talk through a little bit about why they had the experience they did, why you heard what you did. You know, you want to hear both sides. That old saying is really true, right? There's my side, your side, and what really happened. And your job is to figure out whether this is like a red halt, stop, danger ahead flag, or if it's a proceed with caution flag. Maybe you need to talk to 2 more references if you hear some stuff that is not making you feel confident in the decision that you're about to make and the contract that you're about to sign. So that's what I would say to you about references. Please, please check them. Don't just drive through it. Be present. Be proactive in finding an expanded list of references, because again, we're all busy. So you might need to start with 6 to actually be able to talk with 2 people. So sometimes, just like with employees, we need lots of applications, lots of prospective employees that we can then narrow down to our final selection. It's the same thing with client references. If you've got tips, if you've heard something, or you've got a question that you have found to be particularly effective in these kinds of conversations, I would love if you would chat it in here in the comments for sure. Let all of us benefit from each other's learning. That's what is so wonderful about this Nonprofit Accidental Techie Facebook page and community, is that we're all kind of helping each other, because you can't know everything. So if you've got something to share, would love to share that with our community here. Next week is a weird week because 4th of July is Thursday. I will be here on Friday, probably alone, doing a Facebook Live. I think lots of people are taking either the whole week or definitely Friday off. It's weird to not be able to just roll right into the weekend from Independence Day. I will tell you what I'm going to talk about, though, which you might want to tune in or definitely watch afterwards, is someone put up a fake Maureen Walbioff Facebook page this week. I've hit the big time. I've hit the hackers. I don't know how I rose up to somebody's attention, but I started to hear from people that they were getting weird Facebook messages from me, and I want to share with you what happened. What the resolution was, what the process was, and most particularly, how this can happen. How could somebody pretend to be me and get access to my Facebook friends? Ooh, it happens. Doesn't just happen to big name people. It happens to people like us. It happened to a relative of mine, and she actually had to create a whole new Facebook account with a different username that wasn't her name. So we're going to dig into that just a little bit, because first time it happened to me, so certainly wearing my Nonprofit Accidental Techie badge, trying to navigate, Facebook security and figure all that stuff out. So I hope this was helpful to you. I really hope you have an awesome weekend, a wonderful holiday break next week. Don't work. Give yourself independence on Independence Day. If you can possibly swing it, take the day off, eat some watermelon, don't work. And hopefully I will see some of you next week, 12:30, to talk about Facebook fake accounts and how to get out of that if it happens to you. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Thanks again.